Okay, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Occupational Pathways in the Applied Science and Technology Sector for People with Disabilities. My name is Greg Lockwood and I'm Stakeholder Coordinator at the BC Centre for Employment Excellence. For those of you who are not familiar with the Centre, it was created in 2012 with funding from the provincial and federal governments to act as a research and knowledge sharing organization for BC employment service providers and employers. The Centre's mandate is not only to do innovative research, but also to find ways to share best practices with BC practitioners and employers and better integrate evidence into practice. We created this webinar series as a way to reach out and connect with practitioners. And through this series, we have highlighted new research by the Centre, but we are also tapping into the knowledge and expertise within the employment services community. You are invited to view the video recordings of previous webinars that we have posted on our website. Today's webinar highlights a new project being conducted by Applied Science Technologists and Technicians of BC, also known as ASTTBC. And ASTTBC has consulted with employers, people with disabilities, and other stakeholders on strategies to support occupational pathways for persons with disabilities interested in the applied science and engineering sector, a sector that is facing a significant skills shortage of over 31,000 workers over the next 10 years and is looking for new talent pools to address this labor market supply gap. You may remember the ASTTBC team of presenters from our December 2015 webinar, Jacqueline Durat and John Coward. Jacqueline is Manager of Executive Initiatives at ASTTBC and has over 25 years of experience in the employment industry. During the tech boom, she was part of a management team that rapidly grew from a small high-tech company from 8 to over 60 multidisciplined professionals, and in 1999 resulted in the third largest high-tech takeover in Canada's history. Since 1995, she has worked almost exclusively with engineers and technology professionals, most recently delivering a federally funded program integrating internationally trained engineers into the manufacturing sector and working for UBC's Engineering Co-op program. She holds a BA from UBC and enjoys delivering spirited, infectious enthusiasm. And John Coward has extensive experience in the employment services sector in BC for over 3 decades. He's developed and managed a wide range of award-winning federally and provincially funded employment programs and services. He has been a senior business consultant since 2010 and worked on a number of national and provincial initiatives and provides management consultation services for several employment services providers. Over the course of his career, he has served on the boards of directors of Aspect, the BC Career Management Association, and BC Work Infonet. I would like to add that John also has an infectious enthusiasm. Today's presentation will last about 45 minutes, leaving some time for questions and discussion. You are encouraged to submit questions and comments to our presenters in the questions feature of your panel, and we will address questions during and at the end of the presentation. Remote card or live closed captioning is now available during the Centre's webinars, and you can find the link in the reminder email that was sent out this morning and earlier this week. And now it is my pleasure to hand the microphone and the camera over for a couple of minutes, at least, over to Jacqueline and John. There we go.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
So our workshop today, Persons with Disabilities, Accessibility to Technical Occupations, is a recent project initiated by ASTTBC through funding from the federal and provincial government, the Community Employer Partnership Plan. It's a local labor market partnership initiative and involves a wide range of community stakeholders. Jacqueline, you want to give an introduction around the ASTTBC?
Yes, for those of you who don't know, ASTTBC is one of the largest registrars and professional associations in British Columbia. We focus on registering technologists and technicians and technical specialists in the province. We, as an association, pursued this funding. My CEO, John Leach, experienced Randy Lewis speaking at an untapped conference last year and enjoyed his presentation based on his book called No Greatness Without Goodness, about the exploration of Walgreens with regards to hiring people with various disabilities, and the success that the corporation had in the United States with regards to hiring those individuals. And was so impressed with Randy Lewis's presentation that he invited Randy to speak at our AGM. And from that was born a desire for our association to move forward with researching to increase potential, find potential, and increase the presence of people with disabilities within the technology and engineering tech sector. So we applied for funding and hired John Coward to do this research for us. I'll pass back to John now.
So the webinar, I want to switch to the next slide, the title slide. What we're going to cover during the webinar is the purpose of the LMT initiative. We're going to look at the skill shortages that was one of the main drivers behind ASTTBC doing it. We're going to outline the consultation process that we went through. We're going to identify some of the best practices that we encountered during the consultation to develop diverse and inclusive workplaces. We're going to talk about supports to employers within our sector. And finally, we're going to talk about some of the next steps that have been proposed through the consultation. We'll move on to the next one then. So ASTTBC is the purpose of the ASTTBC regulates applied science and engineering technologists. As Jacqueline pointed out, we're the 8th largest professional regulatory body in BC. We have 10,500 plus members across the province, and we're a leader as an organization in tapping into alternative talent pools to address labor market shortages. We've worked on projects associated with First Nations, Indigenous peoples, and assisted in the establishment of the First Nations Career Council. We've worked promoting women into technology and again helped and set up WIT, a Women in Technology support organization. And as well, we've worked on strategies associated with supporting internationally trained professionals entering the technology sector through the support of ITTP, the creation of ITTP in BC. So the purpose of the initiative, the Local Labor Market Partnership initiative, was to engage with employers from our sector in the Lower Mainland to explore and identify current and future labor market trends within the sector, what employer needs were, employer practices, current practices around the recruitment of persons with disabilities, identifying barriers to employment faced by persons with disabilities, and look at potential career pathways for persons with disabilities into our sector. Now, the project was a partnership initiative, and it included the 2 other major organizations involved in applied science and engineering, the Professional Engineer and Geoscientists Association of British Columbia, the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies as well. We also brought on Surrey Board of Trade and BC Partners in Workforce Innovation, BC Centre for Employment Excellence, BC Plan, which is the British Columbia Prior Learning Action Network, and Back in Motion, one of the leading providers of support services in the employment field for persons with diverse abilities. And we launched the project in September at an event co-sponsored with with BC Partners in Workforce Innovation, and our executive director made an important, I think, statement about the crisis in our sector for new talent pools, and also the importance of looking at persons with diversabilities, and he used that term, diversabilities, instead of persons with disabilities, because he wanted to reframe it in a positive way. And for those of you who'd like to see a video clip, if you go to the BC Centre for Employment Excellence website, you'll find a link to it, and you can also, I think, link into it from the website for the BC Partners in Workforce Innovation. Now, as John Leach, the CEO of ASTTBC, pointed out, both two key labor market information reports that came out in the last year highlighted both the important contribution that the engineering and applied science sector makes to the Canadian economy, but also to the looming skills and labor shortage that our particular sector is facing. And the Asia Pacific Gateway Table report in particular focused on the issue faced by our sector here in BC. ASTTBC, if you want to go to the next slide, has been participating over the last year in a broader tech sector labor market partnership initiative that was looking at the demand and the supply imbalance within BC tech sector. And the project, which is about to issue its report, has noted that BC will need to find an additional 14,000 plus workers, either reskilling them, tapping into untapped labor pools of underrepresented groups. ASTTBC has been involved in supporting that consultation process, and have particularly emphasized the importance for us to look at persons with diversabilities as one of the underrepresented group that should be targeted for our sector. There is a real connection between what is being done in the broader sector and specifically what we've tried to do within this particular labor market partnership initiative. So the LMT consultation was led by a steering committee that was brought together of the partner organizations. The interesting thing to note about the steering committee was it was composed of the CEOs or chief executive officers of all of the partnership organizations. The reason that's important was it meant that the commitment of those organizations to the project included not solely the participation in the project, but also in the recommendations that would emerge from it. It puts us in a very strong position to act upon the recommendations that will emerge from the completion of the project. The consultation involved two employer workshops, one co-hosted with the Surrey Board of Trade, and the second one in Vancouver, Burnaby. Those workshops were particularly successful, and when we start to discuss them, I'll identify some of the outcomes from them. Second was a focus group of persons with disabilities, which we continued throughout the entire project. They met 4 times, assisting us in the development of the workshop model, identifying some of the barriers that persons with disabilities had, and they assisted in the development of the online survey that was utilized. they played a very key role in supporting the initiative. Although it wasn't part of the requirements, a research team that was working to implement the project indicated that a focus group of job developers who place persons with disabilities with employers would be a really interesting source of both experiences and opportunities that we might be able to seize on for recommendations for our sector. In addition, another form of consultation that wasn't part of the initial model that we presented to the ministry was a focus group of ASTTBC technical specialist managers. We felt it was crucial to bring their experience to the table, particularly when we were looking at occupations that might align with the capacities and skill sets that would be brought by people with diverse abilities. And finally, again, not part of the contract, we interviewed a number of persons with disability service delivery providers from across the Lower Mainland to get their perspective and incorporate some of their recommendations and ideas around best practices into our final report, which when it comes out will clearly outline their contribution as well. And finally was an online survey of employers from our sector, which we were to conduct. The employer workshops. So as I said, there were 2 of them. They were held in Surrey. There were 34 employers who attended. This exceeded the target of 25 to 30 that we had originally set. The workshops examined examples of best practices from both big and small employers, because it's really important to note that our sector basically represents employers at the large range, like BC Hydro with thousands and thousands of employees, down to micro operations, a fire protection company that might have 3 or 4 people working for it. So it was really important for us to look at some examples of best practices from the full range of sized organizations. We were introduced at the workshops various supports that employers could draw upon to hire persons with disabilities, and it was really quite surprising in the workshops that most employers didn't know of the existence of these organizations or the accommodations that they could provide to employers to support the integration of persons with diverse abilities into their workplaces. They completed survey questionnaires, and they provided feedback on recommendations for next steps. Interesting in terms of some of the employers that attended, the City of Surrey sent folks there, and there were folks also from other municipalities in the Lower Mainland, Abbotsford, and I believe it was Langley also, or Ladner, who Delta attended. So we actually had some participation in municipalities who also are very large employers of technicians and technical specialists. Go to the next one.
Yeah, just step in here for a moment. At the employer workshops, Van City presented, the reason why we have the 3 logos at the bottom is because Van City did a presentation for the employers present around their best practices and some of the actions that they've been taking with regards to hiring people with diverse abilities. In addition, the City of Surrey presented at the Surrey employer workshop outlining, is the camera still? No. Outlining their initiatives with regards to hiring people with diverse abilities. BC Hydro presented at the workshop as well. They're moving towards increasing the number of people on their staff and commitment towards hiring people with diverse abilities currently they spoke more about the success that they've had with regards to hiring from the immigrant population as well as in their Aboriginal connections. But they did show a great intention in moving forward. So those were three of our key larger employer presentations that we offered to the employers that were present. There, you can go to the next slide.
The focus group, Persons with Disabilities, it was composed of 7 people who had a variety of challenges facing them in their employment. All of them had either work experience in the technology sector or had training related to employment within the sector. One of the most important findings from our meetings with them was the labeling issue. They were very concerned about the notion of persons with disabilities as being the label that was always referred to. And they proposed again support for a reframing of the term to focus on their abilities and their potential contribution as opposed to limitations. ASTTBC arranged for associate membership status for a number of the folks who had training and experience, and because we use a PLAR approach, we can recognize their experience on the job, etc., as a way of assisting them meeting the standards for certification. So we've done that. Secondly, we provided them an opportunity to participate in the employer workshops so they could network with some of the employers present, and also bring to the workshops some of the barriers, the examples from their own experience of what it was like trying to find employment within the sector with a particular challenge that they had. It's interesting that one of the things that we tried to do in the project is we tried to involve people from the focus group or who we had connection through the focus group with some of the paid activities of the project. We hired one of the people, Amelia, as the administrative assistant to the project, and one person who wasn't able to actually attend the focus groups, but was able to do the drawing, which we used in the opening slide, which basically represented the contribution the technologists, technicians, and technical specialists make to our society. The operation of transit systems, support in the construction of the buildings, the operating of all of the various public works infrastructure. And so we commissioned that work from him, which we used extensively throughout the consultation process as part of our PowerPoint presentations, etc. The focus group, so move to the next slide. The focus group of job developers was organized by Back in Motion, and there's who's the staff member who organized that?
Cynthia
Abbott. She brought together 7 job developers from various organizations across the Lower Mainland who particularly place persons with diverse abilities with employers. The focus group focused discussion on issues and strategies that they found useful in placing folks. They also identified employer hiring practices, both in terms of some of the challenges and opportunities. They addressed the really challenging issue of disclosure and the pros and cons associated with it, which resonated really well in terms of some of the information that we gathered from the Persons with Diverse Abilities focus group as well. And most importantly, they helped us identify the resources that employers need to assist them in hiring persons with diverse abilities. The focus group of technical specialist managers from ASTTBC was brought together by ASTTBC's registrar, and they helped us identify the value proposition associated with hiring persons with diverse abilities. They addressed, most importantly, potential regulatory and safety risks, some of which were highlighted both in the consultation, workshop consultations face-to-face with employers, as well as the online survey, which I'm going to report out in a minute. They helped us identify some technical specialist positions that they felt might best be suited for persons with diverse abilities. But most importantly, they focused on the need for more research and testing of aligned occupational pathways for persons with disabilities. It was interesting from the research that we did that we couldn't find much information on the alignment of challenges that persons with diverse abilities faced and occupations that they might best be suited to seek. And we think that this, for career development practitioners across the province, it would be beneficial to know which pathways, which occupations, particularly in the technical sector, might be best aligned for some of the folks that they're providing support to. And you'll see later on how this is being incorporated into some of our ideas about how to move forward. So move to the next one. So we undertook interviews of face-to-face or via the phone with some of the key service delivery providers for persons with diverse abilities in the Lower Mainland, BC partners in workforce innovation around strategies associated with supporting the placement, Back in Motion around alignment, BC Centre for Ability around wage subsidy, Neil Squire Society around accommodations and how those accommodations can be paid for by their programs, the Rick Hansen Foundation on their accreditation process for organizations who wish to make sure that their workplaces accommodate them, and Sam Sullivan Foundation. We also contacted, the logo's not up here, but Community Living BC as well. One of the, sorry, if you want to go back to that previous slide, one of the things that we were hoping to accomplish from these interviews was to get a sense of what was out there in the local community to support employers and how we could act as a conduit to employers to make sure that they're aware of those services and supports. So the online survey was done in Google Forms and their Google Forms survey. There were actually 160 surveys, not 159, completed in the 2-week period. This significantly exceeded our target, and we were very pleased with that. The other thing that's important to note that the respondents represented 28 of the 29 disciplines that are regulated by ASTTBC, and they were equally spread between micro, small, medium, and large employers. 45% said they were currently hiring and were having difficulties hiring persons with the appropriate skill sets to occupy current job openings. And 46.7% indicated that they were concerned about future workforce shortages. So that mirrored basically what was coming out of both the Conference Board report and also the Asia Pacific Gateway Skills Table report. The less than 65.6% indicated they had less than 1% of persons with disabilities within their current workforce, with 27.4% saying that they have between 1 and 5%. So it really showed that there hasn't been much success in our sector in integrating these folks. Next one. In terms of strategically targeting, less than 10%, something in the neighborhood of 5% said they strategically hired or hired regularly. Yet, interestingly enough, there was a very high reporting, over 50% reporting that diversity and inclusion policies were in place within their organizations. And again, almost 50% were promoting themselves as inclusive employers. So there seemed to be a disconnect between what they were doing in terms of trying to hire persons with diverse abilities and what they saw themselves as organizations to be as welcoming and inclusive employers. Current recruitment strategies, they were very small percentage, under 20% were utilizing the services of local organizations. Again, less than 10% were recruiting persons with disabilities from the post-secondary system, although it's interestingly enough, we had one of the members of our persons with disabilities group was a recent graduate of a program at one of the local universities, and she was finding it extremely difficult getting placed, although she had graduated with honors, etc. And the interesting piece at the end was that over 60% said that they could be doing a lot more to recruit persons with diverse abilities into their workplaces. Perceived barriers to hiring, the cost of accommodation. Again, we're in the high teens, in the mid-teens around that. And then this becomes really curious because we know Neil Squire runs a program on behalf of the provincial government which will support any employer that wants to hire a person with disability and accommodating the workplace to make sure that they can function well. So again, that was a problem. Stigma and myths associated with hiring persons with disabilities. Concerns about having to dismiss a person after having hired them, and what the cost to the employer might be around that, both from the point of view of perception as well as actual cost. How hiring persons with disability would impact the workplace culture. Employer lack of knowledge about how to become an inclusive employer. Accessibility issues were high, in the close to 30% response, and no perceived barriers. An interesting thing that around 32% indicated that they didn't have any particular barriers. But then again, if there was that percentage of organizations saying they didn't have any perceived barriers, yet very few were hiring, there's a bit of a disconnect. The key one, which was the most significant of all the barriers, were safety risks. And that aligned with the comments that came from the focus group of technical specialist managers from ASTTBC, that from their experience working with employers, that was also the major concern was safety in the workplace. Top tech occupational pathways. It's quite obvious that IT positions would have been rated number one. Positions related to disciplines that we regulate around electronics, building design, technical specialist positions, which are physically tend to have more requirements, rated high, which was a really good sign for us, and also aligned well with what the managers from the technical specialist fields were saying. Civil was high, would impact a lot of public works positions, biosciences, bioengineering. Most interesting thing was all of the above. Almost 25% said that they saw that all of the pathways listed above, under the right circumstances, supports and accommodations, could be filled by a person with a diversability. How could ASTTBC help? They felt that ASTTBC should play a role in supporting the post-secondary educational institutions about the suitability of persons with diverse abilities into careers within our sectors. And they felt that ASTTBC could play an important support role in developing sector-specific resources for employers. ASTTBC could work with other industry and regulatory bodies, employer organizations to develop diversity and inclusion strategies, and finally educate members on community organizations and the supports that they could provide to employers to assist them in recruiting persons with diverse abilities. One of the interesting things we learned was that employers do want help, and they want to help us to help them. So actually 38 employers, almost 4 times what we had indicated we thought we would be able to obtain. 38 employers said they wanted to work with ASTTBC on various initiatives to support persons with diverse abilities coming into the sector. They would provide support and input to consultation. They'd participate in industry training and hosting persons with diverse abilities in their particular workplaces. They would post jobs specifically targeted at persons with diverse abilities on ASTTBC's tech job site. They would be quite supportive in providing mentorship support to persons with disabilities. ASTTBC currently runs an initiative around internationally trained professionals having opportunities for mentorship, and this could be extended to persons with diverse abilities. We're looking at over 20%, close to 25% said they provide informational interviews, and over 20% indicated a willingness to recruit specifically targeting persons with diverse abilities. And just under 20% said they support ASTTBC's proposals and initiatives around persons with diverse abilities. In terms of ASTTBC's commitment to this initiative, we've developed a number of ideas that have emerged out of the consultation, and we're in the process of discussing these with our community partners. And but there's some actionable steps that ASTTBC can take, and as I indicated to you initially, because we had CEOs sitting on this steering committee, these other partner organizations will be able to assist in the implementation of some of these ideas as well. Some of the sector type initiatives, particularly that ASTTBC, APEG, and ACECBC can initiate. There was interest in developing a province-wide media initiative promoting a business case for hiring persons with diverse abilities. A business case that's not just a generic business case, but a business case specific for our sector. And I think that that's what's one of the things that we learned through the consultation is that they want cases that really resonate for them and their workplace situations. Go ahead.
And if I could just speak up here, I found it remarkable the number of times that at the employer sessions or when I was speaking to employers, their interest in moving forward in this area, and quite surprised about some of the statistics that we had regarding success, for example, that Van City was having with hiring people, and that the Walgreens case point down in the United States, that when we started to explain the business case around the positive impacts with regards to reduced absenteeism, increased potential productivity in specific areas, that they weren't aware of that reduction in safety issues, which was brought up as well, that in fact at London Drugs, who's been hiring through Partners in Workforce Innovation, that they were finding a reduction, as well as in Walgreens, a reduction in their safety issues as a result of hiring people with disabilities. So there were a lot of things that piqued their interest around the case study with regards to hiring people into our sector. So I thought that was a very positive finding.
Yeah. There was an opportunity, potential to host an annual sector event around Disabilities Employment Month in September. There was encouragement to connect with public post-secondary educational institutions to support them in recruiting persons with diverse abilities into applied science and engineering programs. ASTTBC has memorandums of agreement with a number of post-secondary educational institutions, but it doesn't speak to working with underrepresented groups, and that would be something that we could be emphasizing. There was industry interest in highlighting resources to support employers and particularly making them aware of what community organizations that are out there with the supports that would be able to help them in recruitment, integration, and accommodation. And ensure that persons with diverse abilities are included as an outreach target population in the tech sector LMP, which I mentioned earlier, and that ASTTBC throughout the project has been encouraging that persons with diverse abilities be one of the target population. In terms of some of the actions that ASTTBC is committed to moving forward on is the creation of a web page with resources for employers as well as persons with diverse abilities interested in the sector. The creation of a Diversability Council, organization similar to WIT and ITTP and the First Nations Career Council that ASTTBC was instrumental in setting up, set up a similar type of structure for ASTTBC members and potential members. Also provide advice around supporting a potential mentorship program similar to the one we conduct now with IECBC. Make adjustments to ASTTBC associate membership status, providing persons with disabilities who are interested in employment in the sector an associate membership status to help support them. And we would be utilizing a PAR approach and the having BC Plan as one of the partners has assisted us in that. Engage new stakeholders to both support and participate in research and training initiatives. Now, around training and research initiatives, there's considerable interest and support around the idea of a research and innovation proposal. The the ASTTBC managers group were particularly emphasizing the need for the identification of the alignment of career pathways with disabilities. They were extremely interested in finding ways of addressing the risk factors that employers had identified. And the idea of bringing on a partner like WorkSafe BC to help in the identification of risks and the mitigation strategies that employers could take around that could be helpful. The idea of a project-based labor market training proposal was raised. The idea of ASTTBC working more closely with BIM, who's one of the service providers for the Canada-BC Jobs Grant, to assist employers securing funding to support the training of persons with disabilities who they want to hire. That ASTTBC should work with persons with disability service delivery organizations to gather and develop the training resources to support employers around recruitment, selection, onboarding, integration, and retention. And reduce and look at other potential funding options. I know under the OPS Fund for Persons with Disabilities, the federal government, that there are opportunities for sector-specific programming, and that might be some area that we might want to look at. So I want to thank you all for attending the webinar. I just want to, shout out a great thanks to all the folks who supported ASTTBC in this initiative. Carrie Jothan, a well-known researcher in labor market and human resources planning, helped us considerably. Cynthia Abbott, who I mentioned from Back in Motion. There was also Jamie Miller-Dixon from BC Partners in Workforce Innovation, played a really important role in helping us develop the survey. Without the support of these folks, this consultation couldn't have taken place.
And Tanis.
And also Tanis
Hawkins from BC Plan.
BC Plan also helped us out. So if there are any questions, the floor is open.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks both of you, John and Jacqueline. We did have a couple of questions come in, and we've still got about 10 minutes left. So if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to send those in the questions box on your panel. So the first question that came in, John, near the end of the webinar, you were talking about a specific business case rather than just kind of the general business case for people with disabilities. We have someone asking, do you have any examples of models that can be used to develop a business case?
Some of the examples that came out when we were researching what BC Hydro has done, they started an initiative around developing a diverse and inclusive workplace in a highly technology-focused organization. And a lot of the ideas that they implemented in terms of internal structures was good, but they also pointed out to how the implementation, and they've been monitoring their implementation of their diversity initiative, how it's impacted innovation within the workplace, how it's impacted productivity, how it's enhanced customer service. They point to these specifically. Employers need to know more specifics around that in terms of how that was done. Van City was also an interesting. It wasn't actually this question, but Van City's playing a really quite unique role in testing how persons from the autism spectrum can work effectively within their particular workplace. And that was one of the problems that we were finding in the study, was that they're outside of that particular quote unquote challenge. There was very little information on other challenges that folks have, and how that might align as not a challenge, but in fact a benefit for an employer. And I think the idea of doing more research around the alignment of quote unquote disabilities with occupational requirements would be a key way for us learning more about what the optimum pathways are and how to incorporate that into a business case for employers.
So, to my input into responding to that question, I found also that SAP, a software company, presented to all at the job developers meeting, and they provided a strong business case for incorporating people with disabilities, which they have available on the web. So Van City also has information that they've been releasing with regards to how it's positively impacted their company with regards to altering their hiring practices. They work well with a company called Focus Corporation, which is a consulting service that deals, a woman who deals with people with different diverse abilities, and she has also been publishing some information around different companies that are using her staff to do consulting work, and how the success that they've had with regards to increased productivity and the uniqueness that her consultants bring to different corporations. So I believe that those are all very positive. I believe that also a great business model and opportunity is to look into Walgreens down in the United States, and look into the book No Greatness Without Goodness, and that Randy Lewis wrote, is also an excellent example of a strong business case. And then to ask further through Partners in Workforce Innovation, Jamie Miller-Dixon has been working with several companies, and several of them have stepped forward with very positive responses with regards to their business cases, with regards to altering their hiring practices, some of which were London Drugs and a few other companies that she's been working almost exclusively with during her project. So I encourage anyone who's interested in looking for strong business cases to contact any of the companies that or do research on the internet with regards to those companies.
And one thing that came out of the consultation was that employers said it was extremely difficult, given, especially if they don't have strong, big HR departments, to find all these resources. So, like, they have to basically do their staff have to do a lot of searching for them, etc. The idea of our TechAbility web page is that for our sector, all of those resources would be available at one-stop shop at our website. And so employers wouldn't have to be searching all over the place for these examples. The business cases would be there, and business cases specific to the sector would be there. The specific resources to support them around recruitment, integration, retention, strategies addressing the issue of one of the various risk mitigation strategies would be there as well. So to have that in one place that their HR folks could go to would make it a lot easier for them.
And I found it was striking, I think, speaking with employers, how there was this consistent enthusiasm and willingness, like, to say it's time for us to deal with this, it's time for us to look at this, it's time for us to move forward with this, we feel committed to move forward with this. And then immediately after that, after the enthusiasm was there was like, but we don't know where to start, we're a little bit afraid, we don't know what direction to go in, there were questions around, how do we do this, where do we go, what do we do? And so that was also part of the intention of the website that we'll be creating, is to offer that support. So yes, Jacqueline, we like this candidate, yes, we're wanting to move forward, but we have fears or concerns around this, whether risk mitigation, whether the cost of specific things, if we have to change accessibility in our office, where do we go from here? And they were awkward questions that employers were having a difficult time voicing, because they were enthusiastic, but they didn't know where to go after there. So that our intention would be to say, if you want to move forward and this is your concern, question, I'm concerned about, like, have a question answer on the web page. I want to move forward. My first concern is accessibility in my office. Where do I go? And then for us to respond by saying, if you have that question, these are some key associations that you can contact that will be able to support you with either the cost of addressing the cost of changing your work situation so that there's more accessibility, or the risk mitigation. Here's our contact at Work BC, or WorkSafe BC, if you have concerns around that, so that we'll take questions that our employers have and then deal with each of them and show them small steps to move forward in that area.
Yeah, and you know, people have to be aware of the fact that our sector is a regulated sector, and regulations, risk management, meeting qualifications is essential, and employers recognize that, and that's first and foremost in their mind. And so for us to start to develop strategies to address those issues, working with WorkSafe BC and other regulators. One of the ideas that was floated at the steering committee the other day was for ASTTBC and APEG to make a presentation to the executives and registrars of all of the regulated professional associations in BC, which we're a member of, on this initiative, and how this could be translated into the other regulated occupations as well. And this is a first initial step around that.
Very exciting. And speaking to that, your comment about, you know, regulation and certification, it ties in well to another question that came in. Obviously, you know, your association is a body for folks that have received some kind of post-secondary training, but someone's asking if there are specific examples of tech companies hiring people with disabilities who don't have certification or any kind of formal training.
Because we're a regulated industry, it's more difficult to talk about entry-level positions without any type of formal training. However, we were overwhelmed by the enthusiasm that I think 38 of the companies that we questioned about their commitment and interest in moving forward with hiring people with diversability. So once the website is set up, and we intend to highlight those employers that are open to employing people with disabilities, I would encourage anyone who's interested in this sector without any specific training to access that website and look at who the companies are that have been identified on that website, and then go through a process of approaching them about an entry-level position because of an interest in, without any formal education, but with an interest in working in that sector. That's what I would recommend.
And should be noted that not only was this about technologists and technicians who are higher skilled individuals with higher levels of training, it was also about technical specialists. And technical specialists don't necessarily have to have that high level of training to be certified. And that was one of the reasons why we focused on having the managers of the technical specialty areas in a specific focus group, because those are entry-level positions, and with very short courses, folks can get into those sectors and entry-level jobs and move up the ladder.
So one example would be fire protection, in that there's 13 endorsements, I believe, in fire protection. There's a first entry-level course that's offered at BCIT. It's, I think, $350. It's 2 days. Limited additional education. You can access it with just a high school education. It's not highly challenging, and it would allow someone to taking that course to gain access to potentially to an entry-level position within that technical specialty position. So that might, you know, on our website, there's a whole group of technical specialist certifications, which one could look at and then start to look at the potential just through some very minimal upgrading in education to enter that field as a technical specialist.
And some of those occupations that were highlighted by the managers in particular, which would be also, besides fire protection, underground utility locators, which is becoming a really important occupation, the wastewater treatment, public works technician. These are all technical specialist positions that require, training, but not extensive training.
Okay, great info. Well, we've come up past the hour now, so we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thanks to everyone for sending in your questions. We're sorry we couldn't get to every single question, but I'm going to speak for Jacqueline and John and say that I don't think they'll mind if you contact them with any questions related to today's webinar.
Yes, so my email address is on the website under contacts, jdurat@asttbc.org, and you're welcome to email me your questions and I'd be happy to answer them directly.
Great. Okay, thank you, John and Jacqueline. Just a reminder that today's session was recorded and we will post the video of the presentation along with a link to that short video, the announcement of the project. We're going to post it on our website and we'll send you the link in an email within the next week. As always, we welcome your input and feedback. When you leave the webinar, you will be asked to complete a short survey, and we would appreciate it if you took a minute or two to share your thoughts, as it helps us immensely in planning future events. We would also appreciate any suggestions you have for future webinar topics. Speaking of, the next webinar takes place on February 28th, and it reports on the Innovating for Employment Success project that was recently completed by Mosaic. It features some really neat stuff around design thinking for internationally trained professionals. So keep an eye on our website, newsletter, and also the follow-up email for more information and to register. So that ends our event today. On behalf of our presenters and my colleagues here at the center, thanks for participating in today's discussion and have a great afternoon.